Hi, I'm Renee Hastings. Welcome to part 3 of my newsletter series on carbohydrates. Tonight I'm going to teach you how to cook quinoa. It's an easy grain, it's a healthy grain, it cooks fast, you can find it in most grocery stores, and it's really, really delicious. The first thing that you just want to remember when you get your quinoa out of the bag or the jar is you want to rinse it. Some grains you have to soak. Quinoa is just a grain you have to give a good rinse. You simply put it in a mesh strainer like this, run it under water for like 30 seconds, a minute. You'll see little bubbles come up. And what that is it's a coating on the grain. It's called saponin. It's a natural kind of herbicide. It's nothing that's sprayed on the grain. It's very, very natural and part of the grain. So you just give it a good rinse and that's it. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to get into our pot. So I have a half a cup of quinoa here. And most grains are 1 part grain to 2 parts water. So in here we have a half a cup of grain. So we're going to do a half a cup of grain to 1 cup of water. If you wanted to double the recipe, obviously you would do 1 cup of grain to 2 cups of water. All right, so let's get started. I'm just going to get my grain into my pot. Next, we're going to add our water. So in some grains too, you're just going to want to follow cooking directions because some of them you bring water to a boil. Quinoa is a grain that you combine the water and the grain before, and you bring it to a boil together. Now we're going to get over to our stove. We're going to bring it up to a boil, and then I'm going to cover it, and we're going to simmer it for about 10 to 12 minutes. Just, when you're cooking the grain, when it gets around the 8-minute mark, just kind of lift up the cover, make sure it's not boiling too much, make sure you don't have to add a little bit more water. So here we have our cooked quinoa, and this is what you want it to look like: light, fluffy. If you ever cook couscous, it's kind of like that. It goes from, really kind of small, hard grain to very light and fluffy. So once it's cooked and it looks like this, you're just gonna take it off the stove and fluff it up with a fork. So now we're gonna get into our bowl and finish up our recipe. The great thing about this recipe is you can serve it hot, you can serve it cold. So now we're gonna add our last 4 ingredients. What I did while the quinoa was cooking was I toasted some pine nuts, and I'm gonna grab those off the stove. And you'll see them here. This is probably a little less than 1/4 cup. And these pine nuts are actually another great item to get at a bulk section in a grocery store because pine nuts tend to be pretty expensive. So here you can only, if you buy it in bulk, you can only buy what you need. So all you do when you toast pine nuts is a dry skillet on the stove, add them in, low heat, keep an eye on them, keep stirring. They go from toasted to burnt really fast. I actually burnt my first batch for this recipe tonight, so you want to just keep a close eye on it. So we're going to get the pine nuts into our bowl. And then we're going to add some olive oil. This is about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I have about 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. You can add a little more at the end if you want to add a little bit more, but you don't want to oversalt it. All right. And then we're going to give it a quick stir, because our last ingredient is basil. You want to gently add the basil. You don't want to really be stirring it around because you can bruise it. So I had a good handful of basil. Either tear it or just kind of slice it up. And we're just going to add it into, as much as you want, into the quinoa mixture. Oops. So I'll add the last little bit of basil there. And just give it a gentle stir. And that's pretty much it. That's it. You can eat it, like right now it's pretty warm, but if you want to keep this in the fridge, it's great to take to work. Another note about quinoa is it's called a complete protein. And what that means is it's easily digestible for the body. Most grains have a little bit of protein. This is the high protein grain. Plus you have the pine nuts in there. So you're really getting a really balanced meal just out of this simple little dish. You have the carbohydrate, the fat, the protein, and a little bit of herb in there from the basil. So there you have it. Try it out. You can find all 3 parts of the newsletter series on my website along with the recipe. It's going to be on the home page. Just go to hastingshealthyliving.com and enjoy.